I'm very pleased to welcome Rand Blake today to join us for the Phileas Jazz Archive. And Mr. Blake, it's a pleasure, and I wish I was sitting next to you, but the Zoom will suffice for today.
Maybe there'll be another time.
Maybe
And
so.
I've been a listener to your wonderful interviews and feel really honored to be here.
Thank you. I'd like to see if I can get inside your mind today. And
Good
by
luck.
that I mean, by that I mean, I'd like to start with on your website. There's a recording of Time Remembered, and
Yes, Bill Evans.
yeah, it's about 7.5 minutes, and I have a couple questions about it. As you play it, do you know where you're going from one moment to the next?
I do a lot of dress rehearsals away from the piano, and I often conceive the beginning. In fact, I'm rusty at this piece now. I haven't heard my interpretation, but I think I usually have my ear to guide me, and sometimes I think of plot summaries, and I'm recalling Bill Evans with Perry and his brother in the Berkshires, the Lenox School of Jazz, where I studied with Bill and Oscar. So I think uh, I think I do, but sometimes I'm not sure I'm the one to answer it. Yes, I think, but many free players. I'm very pleased you've invited me. I'm not sure I'm really the orthodox jazz that you love, really, but
That's
I think
okay.
of Dark Shadows.
You will be adding a nice element to our collection. And I'm wondering, as you play a piece like that, or your own compositions, and you're sort of in the middle of it, do you ever surprise yourself by where your hands go and the sounds that are created?
Yes, I do. I'm only semi-conscious at the time because when I play Laura, I think of Gene Tierney and Clifton Webb and the movie. So there are a lot of different plot things. When I do the Theodorakis Radiazi, I think of the coup d'etat in Greece in 1967. So they're imageries, and they almost overpower me. And sometimes that's why I like to play alone or a duo, because the plots and the characters come right to me. It's very hard to suddenly be present and aware. I do hear some things back, but there's so many CDs I haven't heard of other people and DVDs of film noir. But I think I am surprised.
It
I
must
like to modulate. I don't plan that, but my hands seem to like that.
it must be an abrupt feeling for you to get interrupted and sort of yanked out of that mind connection to the physical that it seems like you have going.
Yeah, I'm out of it when people speak to me after a concert, but even I really I know enough to bow when I come out on stage, and I know I'm on a part playing for an audience, and then I feel self-conscious the first number, but then the lights are down. I usually play in the dark, and I just feel like a movie's being screened in front of me.
Are you able to turn the music off in your head during the day if you're not near the piano, or is there always something going on musically for you?
There's a lot going on, but sometimes I force myself to turn it off because I want my ears to have a rest. I don't want the phone, even a film noir film. I just get a mystery thriller, and sometimes I succeed in turning the sound off, but not always.
Here's a quote from you. If anything, musicians have too many gigs and don't put in enough listening time. They mostly want to hear themselves, regardless of how it sounds. Many don't truly hear themselves, their friends, or the past to know what the future should sound like.
Are you going to have me assassinated? I can think of something. I won't. Well, there's a window right here. They could come in. That's very arrogant of me, and implying that, of course, I have all the answers and I listen. I, I didn't mean to. Is that from my book?
It's on your
I can't.
website, I believe, and I don't find it arrogant. I think that there's some truth to it. Uh, Sometimes just very practical things. Musicians are so busy trying to prepare or negotiate the next gig,
Yeah, that's important.
yeah, that they may not have time to sit and really listen. And then, of course, there's musicians who sort of their ego can be a little out of control, and they're mostly listening to themselves instead of what's going on around them.
Well, we all have a little bit of ego, so maybe I'm guilty of that. But there's so many people I treasure in music and in film.
I wonder if you're familiar with Carl Berger's approach to music.
I know he's taught at Woodstock. I know we played a duet once in Philadelphia in the mid 60s, I think after Train made his trip to heaven, but I really don't. Could you fill me in a little about more, Carl?
Well,
Because
I have a quote from him, and you know, it would be a big generalization to say that he does free jazz, but he does lead workshops in free jazz. And I don't think he objects that we use that term, but there's a little anecdote I read, and it connects to something that you talked about in a recent interview with Ornette Coleman. And Ornette sitting in with the Herb Pomeroy Orchestra, and you had this wonderful analogy, I believe it was yours, that it was like mixing water from the bayou with water from the North Pole.
I like the water from the bayou I swam. I believe I said that. That was at the Music Inn in the Berkshires. And I love Herb. I know Fred Harris from MIT is doing a biography. Uh, and I love his appreciation of Duke and the sound of the orchestra. But when you think that Phil Woods is going to play and suddenly pops out Ornette, it was explosive. John Lewis went like that. Martin Williams, a wonderful critic, really practically flipped. And of course, Gunther was sitting there. This was an afternoon rehearsal, but Gunther knew what to expect. He always does. But I've never forgotten that. I have so many memories of Lennox. One time, Jerry Mulligan criticizing John Lewis in front of a whole audience about the not being up to date with the harmonies. Boy, I crossed Mulligan off my list after that. But so many memories of that wonderful school.
Well, what brought me to this was Carl Berger was led to this statement. He had heard Eric Dolphy in '64, and we were talking about freedom and free jazz, and he said, more freedom is not about less precision, it's about more precision. The more precise you get, the more free you are. He says, I'm creating my own rules, and they're much more stringent. And I wonder if you can comment on that, because it's always fascinated me. We think about free jazz as the ultimate, no constraints, and he's saying the opposite.
Well, some free jazz is very free, and I look for some history. I've never heard that comment. I would like to read further about Carl. I'm not sure how to. He's not just talking about free jazz being precise, he's really mentioning his own vocabulary and what he sees when he's performing with maybe people who agree with him. And having not followed his career, I do like to follow careers, but I haven't had the chance with Carl. So I think I can't really judge this without hearing some of his music, in
Well,
case you want to put a piece.
I'll send you a little transcript of what he had to say. It's quite interesting.
Yeah.
So these days, or throughout your career, can you describe to me where your inspiration to compose can come from?
They come from a sense of life. They come from the street. They come from film noir. And to be more precise, I think of Thelonious all the time, Abbey Lincoln, Billie Holiday, Al Green, Ray Charles. You can guess what my favorite instrument is. Piano is my third favorite. And I think of Bartók and Olivier Messiaen, Quartet for All Time, and the palette of Debussy. And then I might switch to Humphrey Bogart, Ethel Barrymore, and Dorothy Dandridge. So these memories come right back to me.
Would you say your music, I'm not sure how to put this, but a number of composers have written what we call programmatic music.
Yeah,
They're trying to capture an event, a setting.
Yeah.
Is your music programmatic in a sense that you were inspired by something and you are trying to capture it in your music, in your piano music?
I think so, but sometimes it's not. I mean, Beethoven was very deliberate on the Pastoral Symphony. I know there have been many pieces that describe a character. I think instead of trying to capture it, though, it captures me.
And what do you expect or hope that your listener derives from the music?
I hope some enjoyment, some engaging attention. I believe there is sort of there are things that are not terribly noticeable. I may pick a quote everybody can talk about freedom in France and do the national anthem, but I think there's a subtext to my music, and as long as I don't bore the audience, the listener, I'm somewhat happy.
I'm glad you said that, because one of the little things I had jotted down was your awareness of who's listening while you're playing. And do you sense, you get a sense of the audience when you're on stage? I'm not sure if you feel a vibe or something, and may it direct the way you play?
It could. Sometimes I pre-think this. I played in West Switzerland in the French area, and here I reviewed a lot of Edith Piaf repertoire, but I forgot about age. These were young people. They were bored stiff. I had a small handful. They seemed to disappear at intermission. I think somebody bought me a drink, maybe out of pity. But so I tried to, but of course I did more my panel a day or two afterwards when I play in Tour France for an audience that I've worked with for 3-4 days. I really get more of an idea of what people are like. But no, I cannot walk out in Jordan Hall or Châtelet in Paris and suddenly say, oh, that's the man that loves cheese from Bordeaux, or that's Claude Chabrol from Tremolo. No, is it Spike Lee? No, it's Chabrol. So I sometimes fail miserably.
Okay. Well, that's a hard thing, and I think it's even harder in a concert setting than it might be in a club. Sort of, sometimes you can catch a vibe in a club.
Yes,
There's something to play too.
yeah, yeah. And I've done not so much club work. I had a wonderful time at a club in Madrid, the Whiskey Jazz Club, which closed about 15, 20 years ago. And there, some of the musicians, it's okay, but somehow some sculptors or painters liked my music. And it was so reassuring in getting to know the place, the lighting I wanted, et cetera, et cetera. But I feel like many people who really need the gigs for survival, sometimes still unprepared.
I saw another interesting quote from you describing the content of primacy of the ear. I'm not sure you wrote this, but the person who wrote the review said one thing that you addressed was how to listen to your musical heroes without being consumed by them. And it made me think of Charlie Parker and everybody who came after him. So how do you not become consumed by your musical heroes?
Well, first, speaking for myself, I don't know if I am or not. I know that a colleague of mine who runs the Third Stream Contemporary Improvisation Department, I've studied Yiddish music with him, klezmer, and he said, by all means, bring in your dark clouds and your sensibility, but try to occasionally at the beginning get to the style and let's hear more melody. And I've tried to do that, sometimes succeeded, often not. I don't think I wrote that, but I think probably somebody quoted it. And who will decide whether the style and the hero worship is fully integrated in the person who's playing it with her and his own personality, and when is it more of a student admiration where and I think it's very good for people at the beginning of a style to try to be very respectful of the model. And I am when I go, I wish I could play bebop, but I struggle. But when I did Yardbird Suite, that was a few years ago with Anthony, I didn't have to worry about being Charlie Parker, how I love him, but his speed, his assurance. But that's yeah.
Which Anthony was that?
Braxton.
Oh, Anthony Braxton. Oh my.
We did it in an album called One Night in Vienna.
Well, that would have. I'd like to hear that.
Well, if you might guess. I think a Charlie Parker purist would say that maybe I'm trying to dig in, but that it's a little bit counterfeit. But I just didn't want to only stay with Billie Holiday ballads and the beautiful longing and expressions of Mahalia Jackson. I have to once in a while dig myself out of a hole. But I do love models. They're very, very important.
Yes. Do you think it's harder for young musicians to find something new to present, to find a style that hasn't already been done? I mean, we've had 100 years or so of jazz, and it's been through so many iterations. Like, what's a young player supposed to do now to stand out from the crowd?
Well, they certainly don't go back to Muggles by Louis Armstrong. They loved Amy Winehouse. Maybe somebody, Abby Lincoln can capture an audience, but a lot of the people from the past, I mean, Charlie Parker has few peers in jazz, but so many of the people coming in right now are not really aware. They don't seem to have spent time with Robin Kelly's beautiful book on Thelonious. When I mention a lady called Nika Koenigswater Rothschild, who I was a waiter in New York, and I waited a special table on her, I learned never to put ice in her glass. I don't know if they know what I'm talking about. But there are so many things they know that I don't. I know Oliver, who's Olive is working with Biden to get people vaccinated. So I try to keep up with trends,
Okay,
but
that's true. Young people today, they are so
they want youth.
they. I could use a bit of that, and
I do.
they're the way they learn is quite different. They can pick whatever they want to hear off the internet, and very different from the way we grew up.
And they want piano. They want the written music too.
They want to
They
read.
want. They really prefer to read music than to develop the ear. Now I have some written music here too because some notes I can't hear if it goes fast. But there was my courses and my students. I'm held in some good esteem, but there are always people. It is quicker to have the written music, and many people seek that. They may transcribe something, and that's done their ear. It's been a good job, more thorough than sometimes what I do, but then they relearn it using their eye. And so when I talk about images, they might say, oh, no, but some enjoy my thoughts, my memories, but people want speed now.
Did you have times in academia where it was a bit difficult to justify spending so much time on developing an ear? I guess what I'm trying to say is you have to justify courses to an academic council,
Yes,
and to say we're going to spend a whole semester listening.
yeah.
Is that
And you'll
enough?
perform 10. Thank gosh, I've had Gunther Schuller to start me off, Hankus and Eden McAdams, who really have supported me. These are faculty, and through the years, I've had some students really very interested, impressed, maybe exalted that they can do this, but it does take time. Big bands expect you to read well, and of course they should. And some of my students are orchestra players doing music from the Baroque to the modern. So they may feel it's some kind of a cult.
I see. I'm going to take you back and challenge your memory, I think. But the work you did in the '60s with Gene Lee, and I listened to the newest sounds around you never heard.
Which Aaron produced.
Oh, that's terrific! What a important contribution, and. Imagine my surprise when I saw that you two did A Hard Day's Night.
Yeah.
So, do you recall the accompaniment that you came up with, especially if you were a Beatles fan, was rather jarring? And do you recall coming up with that, and what Gene, did she have trouble singing to it?
Well, I'll try to ask her tonight in my dreams. I don't know, it just hit. I was hearing Monk at the time, and I think Chris Connor covered that piece. That's so long ago. We did it at a house party in Stockholm, and it got to be something that we would occasionally do as an encore. Maybe we thought at the beginning we were, I hate to use this word, slumming. We know the Beatles are marvelous, well-presented group, but Gene and I would dig more of the Silvers and other groups. But we're talking about now the mid-70s, and I could produce a very convincing 8-minute story that would be very untrue. Very few memories.
Well, if you did A Hard Day's Night one day for an event, and then the next day you did it again, would it be appreciably different?
Well, we'd have to ask you if you were in the audience if you could stand my solo third stream noir. I'm not. I do listen to myself subconsciously, but again, I can't really say I have plots for the Beatles pieces. I've also tried Yesterday, and I like a piece, Julia, very much, which I did when visiting Maryland. But I know Gene and wonderful singers like Dominic Eade, Christine Correa, who performed with me, Sarah Serper, they don't seem to complain. And I think Houston Pearson, who I adore, might have a little bit, but I love playing with Ricky Ford, David Knife Fabris. So I don't really hear myself back. Some of my performances aren't recorded,
I see.
or else I need skills to press these buttons to hear it back.
Well, I wonder if you've seen the. It was about that time you were working with Gene Lee in a film from 1963, and you two are on stage and you get introduced in French.
At the
couldn't-
Antibes,
yes.
it's the Antibes Festival, and we did All About Ronnie for one
Okay.
piece.
So you came out and you didn't have any music, which
Yeah.
is not that surprising, but at some point in the song, you are looking at her, waiting for her to hit a note, and I've done some accompanying, and so in my head I'm wondering, does Rand know what note she's about to sing, and is it guiding his chord or whatever choice, what he's about to play?
Often it does. Often I can predict what she's going to produce, her tone, her beautiful dark velvet voice. But there are other times I'm just flabbergasted. I'm thrilled by a note she will come up with. And I think I don't really scrutinize I probably one part of the sound that I had in my head might come, but I would curtail it to Jean, and there are things she's done. I'm still horrified. I think one of the best things we did is our first album, Laura, but there's one time where I play a chord very loudly, and I was afraid of interrupting her vocal. I mean, I know the instrumentalist has a right occasionally to take over, but I really think it's so important to hear the human voice. But she really can surprise me, to get back to your. So I'm only able to predict occasionally, and I'm not sure I'm consciously thinking of this. There must be something in me that does.
I think one of her skills must have been the ability to not get thrown off by your accompaniment. I'm not sure that sounds right, except that I've accompanied singers where
Yes,
if I play something that either was a mistake or my try at a nice chord substitution, and I get that dirty look from the singer, and boy, she was very skilled at hanging on to what she was doing.
And she heard me a lot of solo piano, and I've heard her with other groups. And of course, I could say maybe you're performing with the wrong singer.
Thank you
I
for
don't know if
that.
you
That
can
makes
cut
me
that.
feel a little better. Let me talk about song titles for a moment. Do you write pieces with a song title in mind, or do you name them halfway through or perhaps when they're done?
Well, rarely do I think of it before. I know I've written two pieces in the last year that I wish musicians would cover: Memphis for Martin Luther King, Jean Plumet, and The Short Life of Barbara Monk. With Barbara Monk, I remember getting ready to take off at Logan Airport to get to the funeral, and I passed out in Boston. And I went home thinking of Barbara and her mother, Nellie, and the whole family, and the cousin, Jackie Bonneau, Monk wrote for his niece. But in Memphis, I thought particularly maybe should I call it Detroit, and my colleague Hank Snetsky's wonderful recording artist said this sounds more Southern, and then I kept thinking of the assassination in Memphis, and in my various renditions, there's something we do a melody that I might imagine Al Green doing, and then suddenly little things happen, like I have a little motif, and that comes in very discreetly at first, and the playing goes on, and then it becomes wild as the killer is getting his ammunition all ready with the help of an ally or two. And then, so there are things that are thought through. Earlier pieces like Vanguard are just in space. There's no real plot, but every time I play it, there may be, often I play it missing Jean because she sang it with me so many times.
Well, that's very interesting. Some of these thoughts that I have in these questions, I don't really honestly think they have an answer. Like, what does music mean? What can it mean if it's an abstract art form, especially if there's no singing, there's no clear story. So
You're right.
all affect different people very differently.
I know that I try to have a written program. First, it's sort of a nuisance to people to get them to type it up. And secondly, some people arriving at a club just a minute before don't read the program notes. Once in a while, I have the courage to get up and speak, or often I have somebody that will represent me. I don't like to speak much because then I go out of my mood of playing and trying to deal with the audience. And when lights go on, I get back to the present life. But you're very, very right. Like somebody doing a crash bang on Abby and Max doing, I should mention last names, Roach and Lincoln doing Freedom Day, and somebody just hearing it instrumentally without the words might think it's, or they may have heard one word, freedom. They may think freedom to get out of school in May. I want summer. I don't want discipline. So it's rarely do they get it right. But this might hold the music together for me and other people. I know when my Blue Potato came out, my third or fourth record, at the same time Charles Hayden's Liberation Orchestra, and a lot of it was instrumental. I haven't heard it for a while. So I think very often it doesn't convey. When I do Mendacity, Max Roach's piece, and Abby mentions voting rights, they may just thought, I don't even know if the people know the background or care. Mm-hmm. And the music, meanwhile, has to hold up. Does it stay together? And there are times I do really, particularly away from the piano, think of the beginning and what I might do as a departure when I go in my world of improvisation, what register of the piano, the roll of pedals, and sometimes I follow that, and often there's a different plot, a different character that persuades me to go a different direction.
Wonderful. Let's suppose you wanted to express your feelings about January 6th, 2021.
Horrible date.
Yeah. Would you have something in your mind before you got to the piano?
Yes. It wouldn't be this. It would be more like this. And on it would go. Mm-hmm. And it would be very disturbing. And I could see people breaking in. And here, everybody's mentioned the very decent police that try to protect the people inside the buildings, and one had a heart attack, and innocent people got hurt. So yes, I would, and I think if I played this every day, there would be a cluster of notes that would appear. I might revert to my opening of Memphis, thinking of the crowd and Martin Luther King, but it would immediately come back to Washington. And it might not be as premeditated, my musical composition, as the ideas of Donald Trump were. I think he orchestrated it like he felt he was the Tchaikovsky captain of the East Coast. But I would have an idea, just like when I play Barbara Monk. Suddenly I might go into knowing how fond Nika was of Barbara. So a lot is going on there, which is not to say that that's happening to a lot of musicians who come up with wonderful ideas.
I'd like to veer off for a moment along those lines. Do you have a feeling about current events and what it says about our country and human nature?
Yes, it's very sad. I've started a piece called 2020, and the first part is isolation. It's still continuing through 21. I sometimes don't replay them often, so they're fragments that remain in my memory, but I know that midway or at the end would be disillusionment. And have we lost the old spirit? Was the country better? It certainly wasn't in racism, but were there things still? And now we see the disease, the cancer spreading around the whole world, and diseases that cannot be fixed by a vaccination. We seem to have intolerance from history to present to future of all kinds. Very, very tragic. What can the youth think for tomorrow?
Do you have a second ear available to you? The reason I bring this up, I had the distinct pleasure some years ago of interviewing Dave Brubeck in his house, and he was working on a piece. It was the moment where we had sent the war in Afghanistan had started, and
Oh,
he was writing this piece, and it was very dark. And he said that Iola.
was it record? Was
don't
it
know.
recorded?
I don't think so, but
Ah,
he said now Iola said no one's going to want to do this piece. It's too sad, and you know
ah.
it was an interesting moment. And I wonder if you have people who will comment on your music as it's in progress.
Yes, sometimes I don't play it because a lot of social life has been curtailed, and Aaron has released a few video performances here that took place a lot during early last winter. I've gotten some general positive feedback, but I think with everybody's situation, and maybe they're hearing really the very big names in music, sometimes it's ignored. I don't really get a definite feedback. I've also tried to write a piece or two that's happy, but that's much harder. But Dave Brubeck, I'd love to hear that. A little side note, my first time I ever got on the airplane, Jean Lee was with me, and in front of me was Iola Brubeck. And she said, "Kids, don't worry, we're not going to crash." I think Jean and I were going like that, and we asked for extra brandy, and Iola was wonderful.
She was, and she was a big part of his career.
Yeah, really.
What about the mechanical part of writing your music down?
I do very little of it. I did a piano sonata as for my graduation at Bard College, and Gunther said, "Good, Rand, join mankind. You really are mediocre sometimes." So, but I didn't. I just knew compositions. Then you have the B theme. Then you have improvisation, and then there's a fancy word when you come back and repeat the themes in different keys.
Yes,
And
the recapitulation, I think.
yes, recapitulation.
Makes it very clear.
And I had to say this on an oral test at Bard College, but probably as a kid I had dyslexia on reading, and now I have ear dyslexia. If I'm going to learn a language, I can read it, but I just had my record player on all the time in Springfield, Massachusetts, and wherever, and later New York and here. So I missed many events of growing up. I just had to hear this record, Scythian Suite by Prokofiev, Shostakovich's 10th Symphony. I remember standing up at the Bushnell Memorial Auditorium in Hartford when one chord was Shostakovich is sometimes a milder composer, but there's a shocking chord in the first movement, and I screamed out loud, and some guy behind me said, "Should I put some restraint on you?" And then Monk, how he ended I Should Care. Chris Connor's version of Driftwood, which nobody seems to play anymore. Abbey's Throw It Away, Down Here Below, Mal Waldron, Straight Ahead.
That's certainly
So many
something for those moments. I had one where I was at a Mahavishnu Orchestra concert with John McLaughlin. Billy
Yeah.
Cobham did something on the drums that made me like leap out of my seat, and I'm not prone to do that kind of thing.
And Billy, of course, that's,
Yes. Recently, I was had a conversation with a friend that I've almost 50-year friendship, fellow musician, and maybe because we had some of that same brandy that you had on the plane,
yeah.
but we were getting sort of reminiscing about our careers, and we got into the what are we leaving behind? Have we made any contributions that will outlive us? And so I guess I'm wondering, have you thought about your legacy? What do you hope will be Rand Blake's lasting contribution?
I'd love a couple of my, more than a couple. I'd love my music to be performed by others, but I think my legacy is the book. It could be longer. It could be, I could revitalize it with experiences, but as it was, I had so many people like Jason Rogers helping me, and so many others. I think that the ear should be used more. Now, this is not my invention. In India, Africa, from grandmother to grandson, this tradition has been around us, and it may have been through the beginning of Duke Ellington when starting his band in Washington, but it's not really used well enough. And I think many people are trying, and there's some wonderful music that will last and have many more implications than my own. But I do feel, as an educator, I've tried my best to get people to go back to fundamental sound. And it's more than just singing back a melody, but you hear that, you get a little of the melodic rhythm, you get a sound of orchestra, register, the timbre, the sound of a decay. Would that be somebody aging, or would it be an inspiration of a beautiful feeling of spring that our young people have only to sadden over the years, and then they have a very early autumn?
You're a poet also, Rand.
Oh, I didn't know.
Thank you for that.
I have a question for you.
Yes. Okay.
Did your interview start, or were you already at Hamilton? You've done some intriguing.
I've been at Hamilton just a couple years as an adjunct teaching the saxophone, which I still do there. But we can thank an alum named Milt Filius for this project. It was his idea and his initiative, and I was basically engaged to try to carry out his wishes.
I wish we had brandy right now to toast him,
We
say a
would.
prayer.
We would. It changed my life.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yes, and it's interesting to know that I think that Milt's musical tastes, he was very passionate about music, but if the three of us were in a room talking about, and Charlie Parker's name came up, he would go, oh, no. His tastes were in the swing world, but he had, thankfully, he sort of let me go with the project before he passed away, and so here I am with you.
And thank you, Milt, though, for making this possible, even though you would feel nauseous if you heard me play.
Well, I don't know. That's that's a strong word.
Yes, it is.
Yes, but the bit you played, like you reach out to the piano on occasion during this interview, and you put your hands down. I'm wondering if you put a chord type to what you're playing. Oh, here's a D flat 13 chord. Do you think that way?
No, I can't say I never. I mean, I Well, even in teaching, I think more of triad progressions, going to different keys rather than. I love the 3 years. There are 3 great years in Stan Kenton's life, and from 48 to 51 or 2, and then the awful trash that came. So those have skyscraper chords, but I just hear things. Would you like me to play a standard or one of my own pieces, or do we have time? We're about to close, maybe in 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, I would love to hear. Actually, I'd love to hear something of your own if you'd like to play.
Okay.
Yeah, I would really enjoy that.
And of course, I don't usually play this so briefly, but immediately, and of course the lights are on. I'm with Monk Row. Aaron's here. My wonderful cat, Vector Dutra, is here on my right. But that was Barbara Monk. Sometimes I pop to other Monk songs, but this is the memory of Barbara. Toot, Nellie, Thelonious, Nika, Charlie Rouse, so many people that love Monk.
You're very into dynamics and it's setting up expectations and sometimes giving us what we might expect and then sometimes not.
Yeah.
I especially like the part where it sort of eased into that nice waltz.
Yes.
Yeah.
I saw her waltzing almost on ice in Central Park. And of course, as the memories go on, I sense I'm there watching her for 10 minutes. And of course, this is exaggeration. But I remember a Thanksgiving turkey supper I took her out to because her mother made wonderful organic food, but I don't think meat was encouraged. Monk, it's so great to be with you. I've loved your show for years.
There's a great deal to learn from you, and I think I don't have people talking about some of these things, so this has been very valuable for me.
Yeah. You came up with some wonderful questions and thoughts.
Thank you. If you were to play something, I'm trying to think of the connection between your composing and your 80-some years of memories. Do you have memories that come to you? I mean, I know that you had said something about trying to affect the way you dream.
Yes, and one time there was so much disease, racism, everything going on that I said I want to go into an elegant drawing room and have an Agatha Christie mystery where the murdered person is really a terrible person, so there's no guilt about somebody's death. I've tried that 3 or 4 times in the winter, and only one time was I successful. But I have a lot of nightmares. I really like to be alone in my room because it sometimes it can be noisy with some of my reflections.
Yeah.
And
Well, you certainly have made an impact on a lot of people, and I thank you for that. I also am appreciative of how quiet your cat was during the interview.
he usually is more visible. And I hope you'll sometime visit Brookline, Massachusetts, or the conservatory in Boston because we're celebrating our 50th anniversary next year. So people from the past, people there, and we have a marvelous jazz chairperson, Ken Shatworth, who does beautiful arrangements. And I continue still, I call what I do when I think of models recomposing because I add myself, but I still want to allude to somebody else. You're a great listener, Monk. You have been on your interviews.
Thank you. I take that as a high compliment. So I'm going to pause our recording here, and then we'll have our official goodbye, all right?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Blake.